אפשר להשם צדיקים יבואו גבול זה.
Shabbat Shalom, my dear congregants and dear guests of Beth Tikvah. Parashat Shemini. In Parashat Shemini, the book of Vayikra or Leviticus transitions from a very elaborate and week-long ordination ceremony of Aaron and his 4 sons to a brief yet highly troubling incident involving the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, 2 of the high priest's children. For the reason that is not clearly stated in the Torah, Nadav and Avihu step forward and offer something that is called strange fire, Esh Zara, to God. As a result, God swiftly sends forth a fire that consumes them. Now Aaron's sons Nadav, Avihu, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, and laid incense on it. And they offered before God a strange fire, which had not been enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from God and consumed them. Thus they died before God. Vayikra 10:2. So the question is, what precisely did Nadav and Avihu do that was so irreverent and blasphemous that it merited divine punishment? Why would God annihilate devoted priests who had previously in the book of Exodus accompanied Moshe, Aaron, and 70 elders up Mount Sinai to receive a direct vision of God? The Torah does not explicitly state what Nadav and Avihu did to provoke such a dramatic response. Why is Torah so scarce in explaining what happened? Why Nadav and Avihu brought this strange fire? And what this fire is? There must be a secret here. Our commentators throughout the ages have employed their intellect and wisdom to conjecture what grievous offense the sons of Aaron might have committed. Some rabbinic midrashim view the brothers as guilty of arrogance, because Nadav and Avihu, it said in the Torah, each took his fire pan to make an offering. They each did it separately, without consulting with one another or with Aaron and Moshe. The other commentators accused the priests of entering the sanctuary intoxicated or drunk, or maybe dressing so casually that they displayed extreme disrespect for the sanctuary and for the surroundings. Other commentators interpret the strange fire offered by Nadav and Avihu as a symbol of their ambition, their eagerness to replace Moshe and Aaron as leaders of the people of Israel. For the priests were not given any instructions on how to bring incenses to the sanctuary yet, so they acted on their own accord for their own egoistic reasons. But there are other mysteries to be uncovered. After Aaron learned about the deaths of his 2 sons, who were just ordained to be priests, just like immediately, Moshe utters very enigmatic words. He says, "Then Moshe said to Aaron, 'This is what God meant by saying, through those near to me I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people.' And Aaron was silent." 2 big questions arise from this verse. First, Moshe says, "This is what God meant by saying, through those near me I show myself holy." But where in the Torah did God say that? What is Moshe explaining? What is he quoting? Rashi points out that actually nowhere. God never said that. So what does this explanation mean? While saying this is what God meant, we're still left perplexed with what actually God mean. That is a sort of explanation that does not explain anything. And the second big question is why Aaron, the father of 2 perished children, remains silent. And Moshe even instructs Aaron and their brothers not to grieve for Nadav and Avihu, yet Moshe instructs the rest of the Israelites to grieve for them. Do you see how strange this text is? While the primary interpretations of the death of Nadav and Avihu in Jewish tradition is a divine judgment, God demands reverence, obedience, and respect for those who serve him, particularly those who are closest to him, like the priests. By punishing Nadav and Avihu for their transgression, God demonstrates his holiness and the importance of following his commandments. However, some interpretations explore other aspects of their death. If God was angry with Nadav and Avihu, why does he say, "Through those near me I show myself holy"? That implies that Nadav and Avihu were near or close to God, and God showed his glory through them. That doesn't look like anger or punishment. Talmud comes with the very unexpected reading of these verses. In Tractate Zevahim, page 115b, we find following text. The Holy One, blessed be he, said this statement to Moshe, "Through those near me I show myself holy." But Moshe did not know its meaning until the sons of Aaron died. Once the sons of Aaron died, Moshe said to him, "Aaron, my brother, your sons died only to sanctify the name of the Holy One, blessed be he." When Aaron knew that his sons were beloved by the Omnipresence, he was silent and received the rewards as it stated, and Aaron was silent. From this, we understand that Nadav and Avihu, for some reasons, were dear to God, close to him, and God's name was sanctified through them. That is why Aaron was silent, because he understood that his sons were beloved by God rather than punished by him. Rashi expands on this reading even more. This is a quote from his commentary. Moshe said to Aaron, "Aaron, my brother, I knew that the house would be sanctified by those intimate with God, and I believed it would be either by me or you. But now I see that they, Nadav and Avihu, are greater than both you and I." So what does this mean? Nadav and Avihu greater than Moshe and Aaron? How is that possible? And where is this idea coming from? Just kind of a side note, I used to really dislike Midrashim because I always thought that they kind of fantasize and come up with all kinds of weird ideas which come who knows from where, and like all these weird stories that are not in the Torah, and I felt that this is not genuine and like not true and all of that, until I had a chance to study Midrashim for real. And all of this opinion, they always come from very, very attentive reading of the text. So if we pay a very close attention to what is said in the text, and as we read attentively the account of death of Nadav and Avihu, it actually reveals a very interesting and notable tension within the text. Today in Parashat Shemini, it appears that their death seems to be a punishment, right, for having brought the unwanted offering, strange fire. However, in Parashat Aharei Mot, that we're going to read next, 6 chapters later, we read, God spoke to Moshe after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron who died when they drew close to the presence of God. This is Vayikra chapter 16, verse 1. So Parashat Aharei Mot makes no mention of any mistake, suggesting that the death of Nadav and Avihu was a result of proximity to the divine. They drew too close to the presence of God and they died. Unlike the version given in our Parasha, this later account of Aaron's son's death refers neither to strange fire nor any other transgressions. You see how these two stories work together. Ariel Evan Mais, he is an assistant professor at Stanford University in the Department of Religious Studies, and he holds PhD in Jewish Studies from Harvard University and a rabbinic ordination from Beit Midrash Harel in Israel. He wrote a truly magnificent research that is called Like a Moth to the Flame, the Death of Nadav and Avihu in Hasidic Literature. I very much recommend this if you are in this type of reading. There he explores the themes of ecstatic longing for God in the story of the death of Nadav and Avihu. And he writes, I quote from his research, "Rather than following the ancient interpretative thrust that casts the death of Aaron's son as a punishment for sin, a remarkable number of Hasidic masters offer a positive reading of Nadav's and Avihu behavior. And one of the first versions of this opinion appears in the work of Moroccan sage, Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar. He lived in 17th and beginning of 18th century. This is what he wrote. Their death was the result of having come too close to God. With great love, they approached the supreme light, and in doing so, they expired. They expired, and this is the kiss with which the righteous die. It is the same for all righteous individuals, though while the kiss comes to some of them, others go forth and pursue it. Even the feeling of their death drawn near cannot hold them back from the dearest and most pleasant dvikut, the connection to the holy, beloved intimacy, and sweetest affection until their very soul expire. The nature of this experience cannot be grasped. It lies beyond intellectual comprehension and cannot be expressed in words, either spoken or written. It cannot even be imagined." Amid rather conventional discussion of the reasons for death of Aaron's sons, he offers a piece of commentary centered upon the intense longing for communion with the divine, even at the expense of their lives. Ibn Attar reads Nadav and Avihu as a template for worshipper overcome by a kind of semi-prophetic ecstasy bordering with madness. The mind and body are torn asunder as the soul, longing to return to its source, rebels against the constraints of the body. And following this line of interpretation, Rabbi Avraham Yehoshua Heschel of Apta, who lived also in 18th and 19th century, also known as Apter Rav, offers one of the most strikingly positive reading of the death of Nadav and Avihu in Hasidic canon. His commentary makes no mention of sin, focusing entirely on their demise as a result of their proximity to God. This is what he writes: "How exalted, lofty, and elevated was the death of these two sons of Aaron as they drew near to God. They approached the sweet pleasantness of the highest delight and died. They themselves sensed that their souls were connected to the highest pleasantness, and that this would bring about their death, yet nevertheless they did not hold themselves back from giving over their souls and spirits. They refused to disconnect themselves from the beloved intimacy and highest, sweetest affection. Understand this." By the way, I love very much how Hasidic masters always say in the end of these paragraphs, "Understand this," like when it's like completely impossible to understand. So, what does this mean for us? For us here in Congregation Beth Tikvah, let us reflect on the story of our own sons, Nadav and Avihu. Rather than viewing their deaths as punishment for sin, we can learn from these Hasidic masters who offer a positive interpretation of their actions, presenting them as spiritual enthusiasts instead of transgressive rebels. Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar and Rabbi Abraham Yehoshua Heschel of Apta provide us with a refreshing outlook on the story of Nadav and Avihu. They emphasize the intense longing these two individuals had for communion with the divine, to the point where their souls could no longer be contained within their bodies. Their deaths were not a result of disobedience, but of their overwhelming desire to experience a profound connection with God. This alternative perspective on the story of Nadav and Avihu teaches us the importance of passion and enthusiasm in our spiritual lives, but also about being mindful of the balance between devotion and obedience. The story of Nadav and Avihu can inspire us to seek out these moments of spiritual ecstasy in our lives and to strive for connection with the Holy One that transcends the limitation of our mundane or earthly existence. At the same time, it reminds us of the importance of grounding our spiritual pursuits in humility and adherence to divine commandments. In the context of the story of Nadav and Avihu, the importance of observing mitzvot cannot be understated. As we strive to deepen our connection with the divine, it's crucial to remember that our spiritual journey should be guided by the commandments laid out in the Torah. Observing mitzvot provides us with a framework for expressing our devotion to God and maintaining a balance between spiritual enthusiasm and adherence to divine guidance. The story of Nadav and Avihu serves as a reminder that even the most sincere and passionate spiritual pursuits can have unintended consequences when not grounded in the observance of mitzvot. By following the commandments and integrating them into our daily lives, we can foster a meaningful and balanced spiritual journey that brings us closer to the divine while respecting the boundaries set by our tradition. As a congregation, let us be open to the transformative power of spiritual experience while remembering the lessons from the story of Nadav and Avihu. May their example inspire us to pursue a deeper, more meaningful relationship with the infinite. And may we find the balance between our spiritual aspirations and our responsibilities as members of the Jewish community. Shabbat Shalom.